Hello and welcome to another video. In this video, we'll be learning on how to get started creating videos in Python using a library called Manim. So Manim stands for Mathematical Animations and it was originally created by 3 Blue 1 Brown for creating YouTube videos which had animations like these to explain math concepts. But after some time, a community was created that continued to maintain and create documentation for this library. Both of them are two separate resources which you'll have to install separately. They have separate installation methods. So we'll be using the community version in this video. Using the real Manim from 3 Blue 1 Brown will be slightly different. So if you want to follow along, you should use the community version. So we'll start by installing Manim. So you have to go here to this link, which you can just go to this web page and go and click install on whichever operating system you are on. And once you go there, you can follow these steps. So there are 3 steps to install it. We'll be continuing from step 3. So you should follow the first 2 steps by yourself. So you just need to install Python, and if you want, you should install some LaTeX fonts as well, so that you can actually see formulas on the scene. Yeah, and it's recommended to use UV since it's just much faster. So now we'll be starting creating our first project using Manim. So right now I'm in the directory where I want to create my project. So I'm going to go here to the terminal and type in uv init and create a project. So I'll call my project Manimations. Then I'll go to that directory and open that in VS Code. So this step happens after you follow the first step of the installation process of Manim. Now that you have that, I'm going to just delete the Git repository over here as well as the README because it doesn't help the project, and we can start. Since we're using VS Code, we'll install this extension. So if you just type in Manim side view, you should see this extension, the first one. If you go here, you can install it to actually preview the videos in VS Code itself in a side window. So I already have that installed. So we'll start by going to the main.py file and removing everything. And to start any Manim project, you'll actually start by importing Manim into this file. So you'll just type in Manim import star. Now this will not work because we haven't installed Manim. So what you have to do is you have to go to the terminal and create a virtual environment to install Manim. So you can just type in uv and venv to create that. Then you have to activate that. So now it's activated. You can install Manim by just typing uv add Manim. So that should install Manim in this, and as you can see, it's imported Manim. Sometimes you won't, if the error still won't go, then you have to go to VS Code and go here and choose the correct interpreter, which is this one, which is inside the virtual environment. Now that we have imported Manim, we'll start by creating a first scene. So a scene in Manim consists of many objects which are animated in different ways, and an object can be basically anything from a graph to some text to a shape. So we'll start by just creating a scene with a circle in the center. So a scene is a class, so we'll create a class and we'll just type in first scene, and we'll pass in scene, which extends from the Manim import, and we'll create a construct method in this that takes in self, and we'll create a circle. So that's it. Now what we have to do is we have to go to this icon, this corner icon, which should be on the right side corner, and click that. Then you should actually get a window which says something like this, and you have to choose the scene that you want to render. So just click first scene, which is our scene, and it should render it. So you have that rendered. Now you want to actually see the scene, so you get it over here, but you get it in the form of an image. So, and there's nothing on that image. The reason being is that you haven't actually played creating the animation of creating the circle. So you actually have to type in self.play and create that circle. And when you save, it's going to auto render now. So as you can see, it now creates the circle, and we can see a circle being created in Manim. So anytime you create an object in Manim, it won't render unless you actually create it. Another way, instead of create, is just to fade in. So when you fade in, it won't animate actually creating the circle, but instead just fade it in. So we'll just go back to create circle. Now there's some properties to the circle. For example, what if I want to change the radius of the circle? So you can just go to the circle and type in radius, and we'll give it, for example, 3. You can also give it a color, which is the outer boundary. So Manim exports a few colors like blue, pink, and you can see that in the Manim documentation. We'll just give it the color blue and save that. And if we see it rendering, we have a larger circle with blue. Now we'll actually just give it radius 2, and this just creates the boundary color blue. But what if you also want to fill the area with color blue? To do that, we can just type in circle.setFill and give it blue. We can also pass in an opacity, so we'll give it 0.5. And now if we see it rendering, it should have fill as well as blue. So you've created your first Manim scene with an animation of a circle. Now we'll learn about creating more objects and positioning them around. So let's create a square as well. So just like we created the circle, we'll type in square to create a variable, and we'll use the square class. And just for example, just leave it. And again, we won't see the square, but let's just fade in the square. So we'll fade in the square instead of creating the square, and just save it. Now we'll see the square in the scene. So as you can see, the square is created on top of the circle. What if I want to put the square next to the circle, maybe bottom of the circle? So I can type in under the square dot next to, and I can pass in this circle. So I want it to be next to the circle, and I can pass in the direction. So I can pass in right, left, up, or down. So for example, I'll put in up and run that, and the square is now above the circle. Since the circle is slightly bigger, we'll make it smaller with a radius 1.5 so that we can see the entire square. And now we can see the entire square. So what if we can also put it to the right? Like if we just type in right, it should create it to the right now. We can change the distance between this. So for example, it's right now it has less distance from the circle. We can just pass in buff equals maybe 3. It'll have a larger distance from the circle now. So it's just to the edge now. So that's how you position things relative to each other in Manim. Now, right now the square is to the right and the circle is in the center. But what if I want the whole scene to be in the center? To do that, I can actually create a group together of the circle and the square. So for example, I'll call it group and just create a V group, and given a list of circle and square. So now we can give properties to this group or apply functions and animations on this group that will apply as a whole to the group. So it will apply as a whole to the circle and the square. So we can type in group and then move to. So instead of next to, we are going to move it to, and we are going to move it to the center. So the center in Manim is just the origin. So if we save that and run it, we can see that it will now be in the center as a whole. Now we can also add similar properties of the circle to the square itself. So we can, for example, give it a color. So we'll give it pink right now, which is also exported from Manim. And we can also give it a fill. So square dot set fill, and we'll give it pink with an opacity of 0.2, for example. And let that run, and we should see that it works. So we've created our second scene learning about positioning in Manim and grouping. Now we'll learn about animating objects and rotating them. So what if I want to create a diamond with the square instead of the square being a normal square? What if I want to create a rhombus, like a diamond shaped square, or like just rotated by 45 degrees? All I need to do is type in square dot rotate, and this takes in an angle. Now this angle we can pass in radians. So 45 degrees is pi by 4 radians, and pi is exported from Manim. It has to be in caps. So if we save that and run it, we'll see that our square is actually rotated. And if we just rotate it by 90 degrees, so pi by 2, we won't see a difference from the original animation because it'll remain the square. So we'll just move it pi by 4. So it creates two objects now. Now we have rotated it. What if we want to animate the rotation? So we are fading in the square. So we can also just fade in the square and then animate the rotation. So self.play after that, and we can just type in square and then animate, and we'll just remove this and square.animate, and then you have lots of things that you can animate. So we can animate rotate and pi by 4. We'll also animate giving it a fill. So we'll remove this square.setFill and self.play square.animate.setFill and pink with an opacity of 0.5, and let that run. So you'll see that we'll actually fade in a normal square and then we'll animate it. So, and then we give it a fill. So you've animated now the rotation and the different properties that you can give to a square. You can also animate them. So we can now animate objects, we can position objects, we can move around objects. Now we'll do something about transformations in Manim. So right now we are creating two separate objects, the circle and the square. We can also just transform the square into a circle or a circle into a square. How we can do that is we can just not create the circle and fade in the square and then play these animations. Then we can wait. So we'll maybe wait for 2 seconds, and then we can play a transform. So what a transform does is takes one object and converts it into another object. So we'll take in the object square, since we're creating the square already and the circle isn't on the screen yet, and we'll transform it into the circle. And we'll save that and let it render. So it'll take some time since it's a larger animation. And it's done. So we can see it creates the square, it transforms it, and it's going to transform into this circle. Now the positioning remains the same because we have square dot next to circle. So if we remove that, and we can just move the whole group to the center because we only have one object in the scene at one time. So we'll wait for it to render as well. So now it's in the center and then it converts into the circle. So you can do this vice versa by just typing in circle and transforming it into the square and fading in the circle instead and giving these properties to the circle. So instead of the square, we are giving it to this circle, and square exists. We can give it color pink as well. It exists, and we have the circle set fill, and we don't need to do that. And yeah, so now it goes from a circle to the square. So we can wait for this to render. So it creates the circle first, and then it will transform into the square. So now that we have learned the basics of Manim, we haven't actually learned about moving objects properly in certain directions. We'll create a simple project using a graph in Manim. So we'll learn that a graph is actually created in Manim using axes. So we'll type in that, and it takes in an x range and a y range. So we have to pass in x range, and we'll keep it from 0 to 6, and we'll give it a step of maybe 0.5, and we'll maybe keep this at 3. Or actually we'll keep step 1 and to 5, and we'll do the same thing for y range as well. We'll just do the same thing for y range, and we can give it color, and we'll just give it color gray. And it won't work because we haven't actually animated it. Oh, we forgot to put the comma. We have to animate this, so we'll have to self.play and create those axes actually, and save that again and let that render. So now it creates this graph with 0 to 5 with step 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It actually ignores the last one. So you'll have to put n plus 1. So if you want 5, you'll actually have to put 5 plus 1. Now it creates the thing. So now it should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we can create our x and y values so that we can plot something on this. So we'll create a value and a y vals. So for example, at x equals 0, maybe we want y equal 1. At x equals 2, we want it, at x equals 1, we want it to be 3, and then x equals 2, we want this to be 4, and then at x equals 3, we can make this 6, and then at x equals 4, we'll make this 2 again, and x equals 5, we'll make this 9. Or since 9 is out of range, we'll make this 4, and those are the x and this should be the y values. So now we want to create some points, so we'll type in points. Oh, we have points. Oh, it's unindented. So points, and we want to create x comma y. So axis that C2P. So what C2P is coordinates to points x comma y for x comma y in, and then we are going to put zip and then x vals and y vals. So right now we have two separate lists with equal number of items. So what zip does is it will create a tuple with 0, 1, then 1, 3, then 2, 4, and it will be an interval of tuples, and you will take the x and y from each tuple and give it to create these coordinates to points. So that's the points. And now we can start animating these points on the graph. So the way we can do that is to just type in dots. Actually should come from Manim, and then we need to give it points, right? So we go point, and then for point in points, and this should be like this. So that's our dots, and now we can animate those dots and create those dots. So we'll fade in those dots. So fade in and just pass in dots. So let's run that and wait for it to render. We get an error. Reason we get an error is because we have to actually create a V group to actually do this. So we type in V group and then we do that, and then we create a star around so that it expands it. And we'll also actually just give this a radius of like 0.006 and a color of blue, and run that. So we'll wait for it to animate. So it creates a graph and it doesn't fade in those dots. We gave it an extremely small radius though, so 0.06, and now it creates the dots. So we can now see the dots. So now that we can see the dots, we'll create a line that connects these dots. So we'll just type in lines, and then we'll create a V group again of line. So a line is also a Manim object and a dot is also a Manim object. Line between these points. So the way we'll create a line is go point and then I to point I plus 1 for actually I in range and length of points. So the length of points will be the value, and you actually want to do -1 because you do not want the last point, because the last point will not have an I plus 1, but if you don't subtract 1, the last point will try to go to the next point, but there won't exist a next point. So that's the lines, and now we'll wait for 1 second and then create those lines and save that. So we'll wait for that to finish, and we wait, and then we create the lines. We can give properties to the lines as well. So we can say lines dot color equals yellow, for example, which is a new color that we haven't used. So yellow line now. So what if now we want to give numbers to these graphs? So the way we can give numbers, like in the sense 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 on these, is just to type in this, which is just giving some config. So the config basically states to include the numbers, and if you run that, it will create the animation with numbers. So now we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's our first Manim project, learning some basic shapes in Manim, scenes in Manim, points in Manims, lines in Manim, positioning in Manim. We learn more about Manim in future videos, but this was just the basics of Manim. You can learn more from the example gallery in the Manim documentation, as well as just the documentation's quick start. Thank you for watching.